All right, so welcome to chapter 7. This chapter introduces you to something called incremental analysis. And so we're going to learn about what that means in learning objective 1. We are also going to be using it basically in learning objective 2 and 3. So we're going to finish here today. In the next class, we'll finish the rest of the objectives. Okay. So, most important thing in a business is decision making. Ultimately, the management, whatever is decided by management, is going to have a huge impact on the organization. It's either going to work quite well, or it's not going to work so well. And so, because decision making is really one of the most important things managers do, they really should have as much information as possible and limit the amount of risks they're taking with those decisions. Okay. So what we're going to be looking at, in order to actually, if you notice from here, before you actually make a decision, you need to evaluate all of the options involved before you make a decision. And so a lot of what we're going to be doing in this chapter really kind of involves looking at the different possible courses of action before we make a decision, and how management accounting is integral part of helping management outline those different options and provide information which could provide for a very good decision. Okay, so of course, when we think about decision making, most of people think, well, the reason they're making the decision is all financial. It's all financial related. Well, some of it is. I mean, there's no doubt about it. Financial decision making that impacts financial issues or based on financial issues is very common. And I'm not going to sugarcoat it at all. It's quite common, because ultimately management's responsible for making the company profitable. And so they have to deal with making sure they're selling as much as they can, which is their revenue. They're controlling the costs and the expenses of the company, because they want to make sure that the company is as profitable as it can be. However, there are some non-financial things to consider. Okay. What will it do to employee turnover? What you don't want to spend a lot of, and of course, I think it's financial in a way. You don't want people to leave, and you need to recruit new people, train them, and get them to stay. Once you hire and train and acclimate good people, you want to keep them as long as possible. And so the decisions really can't really have that big of an impact on having employees wanting to leave and increasing that employee turnover. Of course, the environment is another issue. I think it is somewhat related to cost, because there are regulations that businesses need to follow so they keep the environment clean, both the air, the land, the water, things along this line. So I do think that's, even though it's under non-financial information, there's certainly financial aspects to it. But certainly the image of the company is also one of those types of non-financial pieces of information. What's the image? CVS had a very, very big decision to make when they decided, and this was quite some time ago now, maybe 10 to 15 years ago, I would think. They decided that they were not going to be selling cigarettes or tobacco products in their stores. Because CVS, like a lot of drugstores, among others, you'd walk in, you'd be able to buy a pack of cigarettes or whatnot. But what they made a decision some time back, like I said, it was probably a good 10, 15 years ago now, to be a healthcare company, a healthcare related company. And so they decided to they made a conscious decision to get rid of things that did not contribute to health. And the first thing they decided to do is get rid of selling cigarette products and tobacco products. So that was to help the image of the company. And of course, since then, of course, CVS purchased Aetna. You might not know CVS purchased Aetna, a very large insurance company with a lot of health care insurance. And so, it's a big player. CVS is actually a big player in the health insurance market. But again, that was decisions based on the image. Okay. No matter what choice you make, you have to look at all the alternatives. So before you can pick what's best for you, you have to kind of know what all the options are. Right? So oftentimes when managers have problems in which to solve or to make decisions about, they want to have several scenarios. What if we do this? What if we do this? What if we do that? And so those are the alternatives that are involved. And of course, they have to look at whether all of this is going to be impacted by each of those alternatives. Right? So this is where incremental analysis comes in. It used to be called differential analysis because it's focused on the different alternatives and the results of the different alternatives. So for example, here is illustration 7.2, which is on the top of page 277 in your book. And it shows basically two alternatives in this case. Alternative A, where you have a much higher, you have a pretty high amount of revenue, but your profit is 25,000. Alternative B, here your revenue is smaller. You have less revenue, 15,000 less in revenue, but your costs are also smaller, so your profit ends up bigger. So, in this case, when they decided to select alternative B, if that's what they did, they know that their revenue is going down. They're not going to be selling as much product or something like this. So they know that that would have a negative, not selling as much would have a negative impact on their profit because the profit comes from revenue. Right? Revenue covers all the costs and what's left is the profit. So the profits come from the revenues of the company. However, they would be saving $20,000 in this alternative in costs. Well, fewer costs mean more net income, right? Because we subtract costs from revenue to get income. If you're subtracting a smaller number, you have more net income. So in essence, subtracting a smaller amount of costs means more income, more net income, more profit. And so here the actual result of deciding to be a slightly smaller company, whatever alternative is there, would produce less revenue, true, but actually would produce a greater profit. And so the company would be more profitable in that case. And so alternative B would be decent. They would have substantial cost savings and more profit. Okay, and some companies decide that in some cases they have to kind of refocus, retool, even some cases get a little bit smaller, and or decide not to offer everything, just offer get rid of some things that keep most of the things that have been working for them. So they might not sell as much, but they might be more profitable. And actually, I think we saw a lot of companies decide to do this in the pandemic because, there were multiple lines, production lines for various products that we needed, like toilet paper, for example, plastics and other types of things, protective equipment. And a lot of companies decided, look, we're not going to be making all these different types. We're only going to be making these 2 or 3 types. And because we want to speed up production, so we want to get more out there. But we also need to simplify the process. We feel it's going to work. So they decided to simplify, focus, get more focused on a few products, but they would end up selling more. So they were more profitable. So these are some of the types of things that management sometimes has to deal with. Okay. Very important concepts to understand in terms of when we're looking at costs, okay? Relevant costs, opportunity costs, and something called sunk costs. So we're going to take a look at each one of those. Hang on, where's the, whoops. They don't have the graphic there. I was expecting the graphic. All right, well, let's take a peek at these then. I'll have to do it more orally. There's a great graphic in your book on this. I think it's on page 277. So relevant costs basically are factors to be considered are the costs and revenues that differ across the alternatives. So costs and revenues that do not differ can be ignored, right? So if we do A instead of B, what are the relevant cost differences there? Another issue is that you've heard this in your economics classes, but again here, in order to pick one choice of action, to follow one plan, we often have to give up another one, right? So if we decide to use a machine to make, only one type of product when it can make two, we've given up that second product, right? To use the machine to make this one product. So those are that giving up something is obviously what the opportunity cost. It's a lost benefit of doing something. Some costs are, and so both relevant and opportunity costs are actually very, very important in making a decision. Some costs are not. Some costs are not because they're already done. They've already been had. So upgrading a piece of equipment to something newer would have certain relevant costs and certain opportunity costs. But because you already bought the old machine and you still have it, I mean, it's a sunk cost. It's done. So when you look at things that have already been happened, incurred, the cost has already happened. It's not going to change. The future decision making isn't impacting the fact that you still have it. And so they're not considered relevant. So your book gives you an example of if you decided to purchase or repair a laptop, right, that you already own, and you decided to repair it. The fact that you are going to buy a new laptop, well, what you already spent to repair your old laptop is a sunk cost. It has really nothing to do with your decision to purchase the new one or that particular new one. So you'll get to know a little bit more about these concepts as we work through the examples. But this is important. Again, page 277. So if you have your book, page 277 is good to sort of read up on these because these are going to be applied throughout. Okay. So sometimes what seems in your intuition to be a good idea ends up not being one. And incremental analysis allows us to see, what the actual changes would bring about, financially speaking, and thus we can actually choose better. It seems pretty, intuitive that some companies would rather, outsource or make stuff other places. But is it really that much cheaper? Just because a country has free or very cheap labor, does that make all the difference? No, it doesn't. If it did, we wouldn't have any jobs here. There wouldn't be any jobs in Germany either, because they're among the highest paid workers in the world. They'd all be in low cost countries. So it's obviously not as intuitive as that. There's a lot of other types of things. One that we have to look at is what changes in the variable costs will happen when we decide, in one case, like I said, to outsource production of a product. Well, sometimes they don't change very much at all. Sometimes you might think they change a lot, when in reality they don't. You're still going to have fixed costs, regardless what you do. Some of them change a little bit, some of them change a lot, depending on the choices. So this is all part of this process that you're learning in incremental analysis. and you'll find it quite interesting, I know. So we're going to be looking at a few specific, what they call common types of decisions that use incremental analysis. The very, very first thing that we're going to look at, which is learning objective 2 in this book. All right, the next step for us is, what if we normally make, I'll just say widgets because it's a fictional product. Let's say we already make widgets and we're already making widgets. And then a company comes to us, look, we need a special order. We want to order another 2,000 additional widgets at this price. Well, we're already making a whole bunch of widgets anyway. They want us to make a little bit more at a special price. Do we do it or not? Well, learning objective 2 will give us the answer through incremental analysis. Learning objective 3 in this book that we're going to be doing today as well looks at, well, do we continue to make certain parts or products, or do we just buy those parts or products from somewhere else, right? Well, again, incremental analysis can show us the changes in the variable and fixed costs, and thus allow us to see on paper that, well, maybe making it is cheaper than outsourcing. Maybe doing it here, doing it in our factory is better than buying it from somewhere else. And, those are decisions that we're going to learn about in learning objective 3. Learning objective 4 looks at products that could be either processed further or sold as is. So for example, a woodworking company could make bookshelves that are just made out of plain wood, right? They haven't been finished, so they haven't been, I don't know what they put, lacquer on there, painted, and all this other types of stuff. They haven't done any of that stuff. So do they sell it as is? Is it better for them just to sell it as is, or go ahead and process those types of things further by painting them and, putting gloss on them so they don't, what's better? What's better? Well, learning objective 4 will tell us about that. Learning objective 5 will tell us about, well, is it better to repair or replace certain things as equipment others get older? Is it better to replace it outright? Is it more reasonable? Or is it best to repair and keep it? Incremental analysis will show us how to do that in learning objective 5. And the last learning objective in this chapter looks at business segments or business products that are not doing well. And, in other words, they're not profitable. So do we keep making it, or do we eliminate it? Do we sell it off? Believe it or not, there are going to be times when companies decide through incremental analysis that it's actually, even though a particular product of many products that they offer may not be profitable, it's cheaper to keep making it than to just eliminate it. So in some cases, I'm not saying in all cases, but it's odd when companies do that. And that's why they were saying in the previous slide, it seems to be against intuition at times. Intuitively, you're not making money on a product, just get rid of it. Well, sometimes it costs more to get rid of it than it does to keep making it. So, that's what incremental analysis will tell us. Okay. All right. So incremental analysis, right? Process of identifying financial data that do not change under alternative courses of action. So same level of sales, same level of same variable costs, same fixed costs, but there's a process. That's what we're learning about here in this chapter. There's a process to help us identify what data to help us make decisions. So it's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting. All right, let's go right to the do it exercise number 1 here. So you can see now if you have your your book on you, and it's open. This is on page 279. 279. Okay. So here we have a corporation, O&T Corporation, is comparing two different options. Okay. So the company right now is doing option one. It has revenues of $80,000 a year. It has maintenance expenses of $5,000 a year. It has operating expenses of $38,000 a year. So that's basically what's going on right now. They're looking at whether to switch to option two. Option two provides revenue of $80,000 a year. Their maintenance expenses are $12,000 a year, and their operating expenses are $32,000 a year. Okay. Option one has this piece of equipment that was upgraded 2 years ago for $22,000. If option two is the route they go, some resources will be freed up and revenue will actually increase by another $3,000. Okay, so what we're doing is we're looking at, we're going to look at this table. We're going to set it up with option one on one side, option two on another side. And then if there are any sunk costs, we're simply going to designate that as an S. So sunk costs shouldn't really impact the decision to choose option one or option two. Okay, so what do we know? Well, what do we know for sure is that both option one and option two have the same level of revenue, 80,000 in option one, 80,000 in option two. So there's no change to the profit of the company. Remember, net income. There's no change to the profit of the company from just looking at revenues. However, when you look at maintenance for the first option is 5,000 a year. For the second option, it's 12,000 a year. So they would have a $7,000 increase in expenses. Remember, when expenses increase, your net income decreases. So the decrease of 7,000 shows that your profit would go down if your expenses went up. Operating expenses looks like, was it 38? It would go to 32. So it looks like your operating expenses would go down by 6,000. If this expense goes down, your profit would go up, right? Less expenses, more profit. Now, they upgraded the equipment, but that was only in option one. They probably decided at some point to upgrade the equipment, right? 2 years ago. It has no impact on what they're talking about today. Okay. Today they're talking about, should we go to keep option one or go to option two? Well, the fact that they upgraded their machines 2 years ago is a sunk cost. Can't do anything about that. And it has nothing to do with the decision that they're looking at today. Okay. So that's why it's designated as a sunk cost. Again, there's an opportunity cost, right? If option two is chosen, right, resources will be increased and $3,000 more in revenue would occur. Okay. And so they would have, David, I'll get to you in just a moment. I did see your hand go up. So in option one, they would literally, right, they would literally be giving up or freeing up resources, right? And so in this case, that would impact the bottom line by a total of $2,000. They would be saving, and as they would have an increase in the expenses here by 7,000, but they would be decreasing their overall costs by 9,000. So in essence, they would be saving 2,000, which is the same as saying they would have more profit in this case. So let's go to David.
Yeah, I just had a question as to why it's a sunk cost.
It's a sunk cost because in this case, they upgraded that equipment 2 years ago.
Mhm.
So the fact that they're looking at a different option today, 2 years after the fact, really has nothing to do with the equipment. It really just has, they already spent this money a long time ago. It's like, just because you buy a new laptop, David, it doesn't take away the fact that you already have a laptop from before.
Yeah.
And regardless how much you upgraded that laptop or not, it doesn't really matter how much money you put into it. It has nothing to do with the fact that you're buying this new computer right now, and what the cost of that new computer would be. So they look at it as a sunk cost, and this is one of the concepts that we need to learn in this part of the chapter. Again, this is something that already happened a while back. It has nothing to do with their decision to choose option one or option two at all. Okay. Um, so that's why it's a sunk cost. And that's why it would have absolutely no impact on the profitability of the company.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm. That's why it's listed down here as zero. All right, so you're going to be getting some questions on that in your homework. I've actually already released the homework for chapter 7. And that's your first shot. Learning objective 2, it puts this into practice. Does the company accept an order for a special price that's different from what they already did, even if they're already making a whole bunch of them? Doesn't matter. Why not make a little bit more and sell a little bit more? Well, it depends. Is it is it profitable for them to do that? So sometimes certain customers go to their manufacturers and say, look, we want to do more. We want to buy more of this stuff, but we want to do it at a price reduction. So we'll buy 2,000 more units from you, but we want this price to do it. Well, then the company has a choice. They have to figure out, well, do we produce another 2,000 of these and sell it to them at that special price? Is it worth it, or is it not worth it to us? Okay. So again, you're assuming that none of the other products that you sell are affected by this. That this is specifically a special order for a specific customer. And you also assume that the factory is not running at full steam. It's not 100% used. In other words, there's room to increase productive capacity. If there's no room to increase productive capacity, you can't entertain any special orders because you're using all of it, all of your possible machinery to put out the orders you already have. You can't do anything more. So this is accepting an order at a special price. It's for a specific customer. It assumes that this special order is not affecting the other sales of the products that you made, and it also assumes that you have the capacity to build more, to do more. You're not running at 100%. All right, so this illustration is part of your book. This is all on page 280 because learning objective 2 is quite small. So here we have this illustration. Sunbelt Company produces 100,000 smoothie blenders. Okay, smoothie blenders per month. And this represents 80% of what this manufacturing plant can actually produce. Okay. The variable costs are $8 for every unit, for every blender. Manufacturing costs are $400,000 or $4 for every blender. The blenders are normally sold directly to retailers for 20 bucks. Okay. So Sunbelt receives an offer from a foreign wholesaler, Kensington Company, They want to purchase 2,000 more blenders at $11 per blender. Okay. So should they do it or not? Well, it's 2,000 more blenders. They certainly have the capacity to produce 2,000 more. That's only a 2% more than what they are already producing. And so they have lots of capacity for that. The question would be, what costs are involved? What costs are involved? Okay. Well, in most cases, variable costs are the ones that are going to be involved. Very rarely are fixed costs affected by this type of a thing. Okay. So, what should management do? Well, that's what we're doing here. This is on the bottom of page 280. So, this is page 280. Well, if they don't do anything, if they just say no, obviously there's going to be a bunch of zeros here. Right. So no changes here. However, what if they accept the order? Well, if they accept the order, they would be selling 2,000 more blenders at $11 each. So they would be taking in $22,000 more in revenue, and that would basically be the same as $22,000 more in profits. However, there are costs that are involved. Let's take away the costs. Well, in this case, costs are important because the fixed costs aren't going to change. So the fixed costs are not relevant to this decision. What is going to change are the variable costs. So the variable costs become relevant to the decision. And if you look back at the variable costs, I'll go back here, sorry. Oops. The variable costs were $8 per unit. And that means if they're going to put together another 2,000 blenders, they would have costs of 2,000 times 8, right? So they would have additional costs of $16,000. So obviously the costs would be subtracted out of net income. It would decrease the amount of income. And so in this case, if they rejected the order, nothing would change, right? No costs, no revenues, no profit. But if they accepted the special order, if they accepted the special order, they would get another $6,000 added to their profit. Okay, even at the lower price for this special order, they still would be able. They would only have to worry about their variable costs, right? Because they're still going to pay rent on the building anyway, regardless how many they produce. They're still going to pay property tax on the building, regardless how much. So the fixed costs are not an issue in determining whether they should do it or not. Okay, so so this is something that's important to look at in incremental analysis here. This is on page 280. So let's take a this is important. This is super important. This is going to be a lot of what you're going to be doing. So let's take a look at a specific example in the do it problem number 2 here. So here we're talking about Cobb. They incur costs of $28 per unit. So 18 of that is variable, $10 of that is fixed, to make a product that sells for $42. Okay. A foreign wholesaler offers to buy another 5,000 units from us at $25 a piece. Cobb, however, will incur an additional shipping cost of $1 per unit. So they're going to increase the cost. Their shipping will go up by $1 per unit. So compute the increase or decrease in net income for Cobb Company if they decide to accept the special order. Okay. And we assume that Cobb Company does have excess capacity. They're not running at 100%. Okay. So should they accept it or reject it? Well, obviously, if they reject it, it's just a bunch of zeros here. So Rejecting it means no revenue, no cost, no income. If they accept it, they would be accepting an offer of 5,000 units at $25 each. So that would bring in an additional $125,000 of revenue if they accepted that offer. But of course, as you know, they would have costs. What type of costs would be involved? Well, the only costs that are going to be involved are the variable costs plus the new shipping costs. So 5,000 units at $18 variable cost plus 5,000 units at $1 each for shipping would give us $95,000 of costs and $30,000 additional net income. And so as you see, if they accepted the offer, they would be able to increase their profits by $30,000. So what would you do? Accept the offer. Okay. It's a profitable offer for you. And so you're going to be doing this in learning objective 2. Fascinating. All right, Arujo, tell me more. Good. Well, we will. Learning objective 3. This is our final stop for today. So here we're looking at this issue of, what costs are relevant when management decides to either make a product or buy it. And so the best way to show you is through an illustration. And this is on page 281. So Bayer & Company has the following annual costs to produce 25,000 ignition switches for motor scooters. Okay, so this illustration is in your book. It shows your direct materials would be 50,000, direct labor is 75,000, variable manufacturing overhead is 40,000, and your fixed manufacturing overhead is 60,000. So you have $225,000 of costs to produce 25,000 units. Each unit would be $9 per unit to make. So instead of making, what if Bayer decides to purchase the ignition switches for $8? What should management do? Well, I know intuitively you're thinking, okay, $9 each to $8, they should definitely buy them. Well, hold your horses. That's what incremental analysis is supposed to give us this information to make sure. Is it really better to buy it or to keep making it? Let's see. Well, if we bought these rather than make these, what would happen? Okay. Well, in this scenario, what we need to know is under either option, okay, $50,000 of fixed costs is going to happen regardless of whether they make it or buy it. Okay, so this 50,000 is already baked into this number here. It doesn't go away if we decide to buy it. What does go away? Well, if you're not making it, these go away. These go away. So what goes away? Well, we don't have to buy any direct materials, so we save money and thus 50,000 added to profits. We don't have to pay any labor because we're not making them here, and so we add that $75 to the profit of the company. Again, we're not making them here, so there's no variable costs. All that's going to be added. However, we do have $50,000 of fixed costs still. So we're only saving 10,000 here. And now we have to buy them. So we have a new cost. We have to buy them. We're buying $200,000 worth of switches, 25,000 switches at $8 a piece. So actually we would be adding $200,000 of costs. And so overall, we'd actually be losing $25,000, or our net income would be decreased by $25,000 if we decided to buy the switches rather than make them ourselves. Okay, is that the end of it? Well, we have to see, is there, okay, so we're not making switches, we're buying those switches instead. Okay. Is there anything else we can do? Is there a potential benefit um, that would make it easier to say, yeah, buying is the right decision rather than making it? Well, that depends on the opportunity cost. Okay. Let's say that if they buy the switches, that productive capacity can generate an additional $38,000 of income because they can now produce a different product with those resources. So this lost income is another cost. So if you lose 38,000, it becomes your opportunity cost. Okay. And so then how would this look? Well, we already know that if we make it, we would be spending 225,000 versus buying it, which is 250,000. But if we bought it, we could actually make more money. So actually, that's also part of the cost of making it. And so by making it, our total costs, the annual plus our opportunity cost, is 263,000. If we bought it, the cost is 250,000. And so that opportunity cost means basically that we would increase our costs by $13,000 if we decided to make it. Because then we couldn't use the machinery or the labor to make the other things. That's the opportunity cost. And so in this case, when you add the opportunity cost in, well, now what does management do? Well, certainly buying looks like a better option than making, if indeed they can produce additional income, if they bought rather than made. So in a buy or make decision, what is relevant is everything you see here. The manufacturing costs that's going to be saved, the purchasing price of the things you're going to buy rather than make, but then that opportunity cost. So everything in this question, all of them are relevant. Okay. So Amazon, this is an older story because it's dated 2011, but it's okay. Yeah, it's all right. So giving away the store because Amazon has that free shipping thing. That's not really free shipping. You got to be a Prime member. Well, Prime membership happened in the mid 2000s, so to 2008 or so. And at that time it was $79 a year. I'm a Prime member still. I think it's 129.
It's 129. I was charged with it by accident.
Okay. Yeah, it's $129 a year. So basically for that, what do you get for the 129? Well, they ship you everything that you want throughout the year. There's no additional shipping costs because basically you're paying it up front. You're also getting additional benefits because you get Prime, Amazon Prime. You got movies and other types of stuff you can access, music, some books, things like that. So it's a whole service for that membership. Okay. Jeff Bezos knew it was going to be costly, but he thought the company would be better off in the long term. Um, well, was that true? Well, it'd be interesting to know that Prime customers buy 2 to 3 times as much from Amazon than a non-Prime customer. Okay. So we're always, and I'm always, if I need something, I will, and if I can wait for it, I'll go to the Amazon app and I'll order it. And just, usually 2 days later, of course that wasn't the case during the pandemic. But now it's getting back to more of that, what I'm used to. A couple of days later, you get the product. So basically speaking, shipping costs rose, and it cut its gross margin. But in this case, more incremental analysis might help Mr. Bezos and Amazon think whether it's still worth, this particular membership. And I think now it's even more important too, because you have companies like Walmart and others that are getting involved in this membership issue, right, for free shipping. So, it's an interesting question, but it's really incremental analysis that'll help them decide whether it's still a good idea. All right, page 283 is your do it exercise for this part of the chapter. And again, it's do we make it or do we buy it? So here we have Juanita Company, and they have a choice. They have to decide whether to make or buy some components of the appliances that it creates. Okay. In the cost of producing 166 electrical cords include direct materials of 90,000, direct labor of 20,000, variable overhead of 32, fixed overhead 24,000. Instead of actually making the cost of these, which equal about $1 each, it's 166,000 of costs divided by 166,000 electrical cords, it's $1 each. The company has the opportunity to buy them at 90 cents each. Okay. If the company buys them, of course, all the variable costs and 1/4 of the fixed costs are going to be eliminated. So all of these are gone, but only 1/4 of this is eliminated. So part A is we are going to prepare the incremental analysis, showing whether the company should make or buy the cords. And then part B is, well, there's going to be an interesting issue of opportunity costs. What if that additional capacity could generate an additional $5,000 of profit for the company? Would they make a different decision? So the first thing again is making that, showing the incremental analysis. So we already know everything it takes to make it. Direct materials, direct labor, variable and fixed costs, 166. When they buy it, of course, they're not going to have any materials, they're not going to have any labor, they're not going to have any variable costs, but they are going to be keeping most of their fixed costs. How much is most? 75% of it. 20. It's only 1/4 of this is reduced. So they're still going to be needing to shell out $18,000 in fixed costs regardless. And now they're buying these 166,000 units. This is supposed to be units at 90 cents each. And so that's going to cost them $149,400. So if they went ahead and bought these, it would actually cost them $167,400 to make them. It's 166. So what's the bottom line? Well, if you look at the differences in those numbers from make to buy, okay, you would see that, of course, they would save money and decrease costs in these categories. But the increased cost in buying them basically wipes out all of that and ends up costing the company another $1,400 in profit if they bought them. Okay, so Juanita Company will incur an additional $1,400 of costs if they ended up buying the cords rather than making the cords. But B asks us, well, look, if they buy them, they still have all these other options. They can actually increase their income by 5,000. So if they can increase their income by 5,000 if they bought them, making it is going to be more costly because they're going to be giving up the $5,000 additional income if they make, which now puts that cost at 171,000 if they make. If they buy it, well, it's the same from the other page. It's $167,400. So now when you look at the opportunity cost involved, they would actually increase their profits by $3,600 if they went ahead if they bought them instead of making them, as long as they could generate this extra income, which they couldn't if they made it, which is why it's a cost when you make it, because you can't do that. So it's a cost. And so that's basically how they would look at those things. Okay. So we're stopping here today. I'm coming back to our main page to get some questions. How are you feeling?